What's going on, everybody? It's Destiny Malibu and my co-host,
DJ Desi.
Welcome back to the Destiny Malibu podcast.
We're so happy that you joined us yet again.
Yes, we're so happy you're back. And today we are going to be talking about another one of these 7 pillars of mental health. We've talked about self-love, we've talked about purpose, and now we are going to be talking about the importance of social life.
Woohoo!
So I always kind of considered myself someone who was really good at being alone. I would often have a meal by myself. I would take drives by myself. I would, go a couple days sometimes without hanging out with somebody and just kind of doing my own thing. Even though growing up I always had my friends, I always considered myself someone who was really good at being alone. Until our house burned down in Malibu. And that was a really traumatic thing. Our house burned down in the Woolsey fire, if you guys didn't already know that. I do have a music video about it, a song I wrote about it, that's called We Will Rise, and you guys can check that out. Yeah, so our house burned down in the Woolsey fire. Desiree was at a mass shooting, which was terrifying.
Super scary.
Really terrifying. And then Desiree moved to Florida, right after that event happened.
So I left Destiny all alone. I was there the entire time. She says she's a lone wolf, but remember, Big Sister was always there.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily a lone wolf. Desiree and I have always been best friends.
Yeah.
And, people can attest, growing up. I think even in high school, we shared a Facebook.
Yep, we were called Des.
Yep, we shared a Facebook. So we've always been very, very close. But I just meant in general that, I was comfortable doing things on my own. So I didn't think that, I had a problem being alone until I actually experienced it.
Yeah.
So Desiree went to Florida, and my parents and I, we moved to LA. So here I was in a new city. I had just gone through a breakup. My sister moved. Our house had burned down. Desiree had been through a shooting. And there was just a lot of emotion. And even though my friends were in Malibu, they were still about an hour away. And I'm sure a lot of you can attest that sometimes even moving an hour away makes a really, really dramatic difference in how often you see people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really, really hard to keep friendships when you're in different states and
not seeing each other every day.
Yeah, not seeing each other, and often even in just different cities I experienced. So I was in a new city, and I felt really, really lonely.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, I spent many... This is really sad to say, but I spent many weekends crying in my room.
Yeah, you called me on a couple of those weekends. You were like, what are you doing, Des?
Yep. And I don't know if any of you guys can attest to that, but sometimes the loneliness can take over. And if you're in a new city or a new state or a new town and you haven't quite made those connections yet, it can be really, really tough.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the change that we had gone through in the last year at that time. I'm sure many of us can relate to that feeling of overwhelming loneliness because of this pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic was a big one. Everyone was at home, and you rarely got to see anybody unless you were in a relationship. Yep.
And I know that there were a lot of different struggles that came out of the pandemics. A lot of new relationships were started. A lot of new relationships ended. There was just, a lot of chaos going on at that time, and we're still not fully over the craziness. You know, I know there's different
states have different things and different hiccups here and there, so you just got to go with the flow, right?
Yeah, got to go with the flow. But a lot of us can relate, especially now worldwide, to experiencing at some point or another an immense feeling of loneliness.
Yeah. And that's literally my worst fear. My worst fear is being alone. I always like to go out and do something.
So going back to the story I was saying about how all this change was happening, we had moved to LA, and then we're in LA for about a year. We decided to move to Las Vegas.
Yep.
And when we moved to Las Vegas, now I was not only in a new city, I was in a new state. So now I was really far away from my friends, because at the time in LA, even though I didn't see my friends, every week like I was used to. I was still seeing them like once a month. I had some friends come visit me, and that was super sweet. And I went out also to Malibu a couple times, but I don't drive that often because I'm not the best driver.
Yeah, terrifying. I always hold on to the door when she's driving.
I mean, I'm not terrible, but I do prefer to be driven. Or for people to come see me. So shout out to all my friends who came to visit me in LA. I love you. And yeah, so now we're in Nevada. We're in Las Vegas. We're in a new state. Thankfully, it's not too far from LA, but it's still a new state. Mm-hmm. So now we're in lockdown. I'm in a new place. I don't know anybody. And I thought I was lonely before in LA. Desiree's still in Florida. And I became immensely, immensely lonely during the pandemic. So at this time, I realized this super, super immense importance of social life. And I realized its importance at a level I had never understood before. Because even though I thought that I was good, you know, having lunch by myself sometimes or doing things by myself, I had never experienced that level of isolation.